Make up mind. Fight.
I am bad at Scout. And I don't mean in that YouTuber humble brag sort of way, where I'll say I'm bad at the video game and then proceed to go on a godlike kill streak. No, I mean...
terrible. You play it nowadays. I'm sorry,
that I am actually bad at Scout. Within my 3,000 hours in TF2, and even after resetting my class play time in 2018, I've only put a little over 60 hours in on the Scout, and I've never played him outside of casual or Uncle Tobia settings. But you know what they say, improvement starts with practice, and I wanted to practice Scout. But I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into one playstyle. We all know that the stock scattergun is amazing, but what about Scout's other primary weapons? I wanted to get a good sample size of all of the items available for use, so I set a bit of a goal for myself. I picked up a strange version of all of Scout's primary weapons, and proceeded to try and get 50 kills on all of them in one day. I realize that TF2 doesn't have a strange milestone for 50 kills, but 45 seemed too low, and 75 seemed too high for my purposes. In this video, I want to chronicle my experiences getting 50 kills with every Scout primary in one day. This took about 6 to 7 hours of continuous play, with some weapons being breezes and others being less so. I want to discuss my experience using each weapon, what I took away from them, and what I learned from playing exclusively with them for about an hour at a time. Now, I want to make a few obvious notes and rules here. I know that getting 300 kills in 7 hours isn't very impressive. There's literally YouTube videos of people getting 10,000 kills in a week and playing a single class for 100 days straight. I know that this really isn't an accomplishment or a milestone. It was an entirely self-indulgent exercise I performed to see how much I could learn about Scout in a single day. If you're gonna comment, or hell maybe already have, that 50 kills is nothing, or to try 1,000 or something like that, then I promise you that I loudly and proudly do not give a fuck. This was just a way of me practicing Scout and getting a fun video out of it. On top of that, let's establish some ground rules. We're doing this exclusively on Valve casual servers and cannot use strange farming servers or coax people into pocketing me or anything like that. Apart from that, any means of leveling a strange or fair game, so pre-game kills, humiliation kills, killing friendlies, things like that, it's all on the table. I'll try to avoid these for the most part, but if it gets really dicey, we might have to resort to it. As long as it occurs in natural, casual gameplay, it's fair game. We're going to talk about my experience using each weapon, give a general time for how long it took to level it, give an out of 10 score for how fun it was using the patented Teal Opal Fun Scale, and at the end of the exercise, we'll wrap it up with some general thoughts as well as a ranking for each weapon experience. I want to stress, not a ranking of the weapons themselves or their viability, just a ranking of my experiences getting kills with each of them for this challenge. That said, let's roll. I decided to do this challenge as a sort of misery sandwich, with my favorite Scout weapons being the bread and the stuff I like less being the meat. This obviously means that we started with the stock scattergun. I don't have a lot to say about this, it's the stock scattergun, so I'll use this section more as a general time to talk about my thoughts on Scout as a class. As a weapon, I found the scattergun to be really consistently reliable and effective. This goes without saying, it's often considered one of the strongest stock weapons in the game, and I'm definitely here to co-sign on that. Hitting a good meat shot or flick and railroading an unaware enemy feels great, and the only things I found problematic were the wind-up time between shots and reloading. I'll take this stuff over Scout being able to fire constantly, though. As for the overall vibe of the gameplay during this section, well, I'll be honest, I was getting capital F fucked at the start of this challenge. With a few exceptions, my KD during these first few games was consistently unimpressive, and I frequently found myself getting overwhelmed and outgunned by the enemy. Keep in mind that I'm used to playing heavy, so adjusting to a faster, squishier class with, let's not kid ourselves, a much higher level of required technical execution took some time to get used to. For one, I had trouble deciding what fights to pick. Scout is obviously a powerful flanker, and I took advantage of that plenty, but due to my general lack of aim at this point, fights against other Scouts or tankier classes took quite a few lives off of me. On top of that, I struggled with needing to close the distance on enemies to engage effectively, and I often found myself being just out of my effective range when I began a fight, which gave my enemies time to adjust and fight back accordingly. Because of this, Pyro was my kryptonite. I swear that most of my deaths in the early days of this challenge were from Pyro melting me before I could confirm kills on them. My aim was also just not good at this point. I know this will be the thing that people comment about most in the video. Like, I'm sure you guys have already all commented about how bad my aim is and how you're a UGC Scout player and are so much better, and are now considering deleting that comment now that I've said this out loud, but I'm sure you'll notice that I'm consistently missing my shots and relying a lot on strafe aiming. The whole point of this challenge was an attempt at improvement, so I just hope that you can bear with me on that front. I wasn't hopeless though. I was still consistently getting kills, flanking, and securing important picks. It just took a bit of adjusting to really get into the scout flow. I don't know what the general consensus among epic scout mains on this is, but I kind of found scout to be more effective on defense than offense. On offense, scout has to contend with a large amount of enemies being grouped up together, which makes flanking more difficult, and sentry guns are obviously a thing as well. It's harder to rush at an entire group of enemies when the whole team is unified in protecting a single objective. On defense though, not only is it easier to flank, but it's also much more common to find and take down wayward, overextending, out-of-place enemies. Plus, level 3 sentries are much more uncommon for the blue team to have than the red team on asymmetrical game modes. Symmetrical game modes though, like CTF and Koth, were also consistently a safe haven. I also quickly realized during the early sections of this challenge that helpful teammates are the worst in this context. The amount of times I was a shot away from killing someone and my teammates decided to scoop up the kill was infuriating. I realized that the goal is ultimately to kill the enemy and that any means of doing that is valid, and that my teammates have no way of knowing that I'm doing a challenge, but it's like, come on, man, I had that. According to my footage, it took me a combined total of about 1 hour and 8 minutes of continuous play to level my scattergun from 0 kills to 50. As for my experience, I'd say using the stock scattergun was a fun time. Its power and reliability made it an easy highlight of the challenge, and if I were more inflow with scout at this point, I could easily see the time being truncated significantly. Overall, I'd rank the stock scattergun section of this video as an 8 out of 10 on the fun scale. After the scattergun, I decided to vary things up pretty significantly and try out the Force of Nature. For those of you who don't know, this is a scout unlock that features only 2 shots in its clip, but allows the player to knock enemies back upon shooting them. In addition, you can use it for movement, as it also pushes the scout back and upward. It's a really novel and fun weapon, but it also puts us in a bit of a precarious position, as environmental kills obtained by pushing the enemy into pits, while funny, do not count towards our strange counter. The first thing I noticed when using the Force of Nature is how committal it is compared to the stock scattergun. Due to it only loading 2 shots per clip and its knockback effect being capable of pushing enemies out of your effective 1-shot range, you've really got to commit and line up your shots before firing. This is both a blessing and a curse, as a well-aimed shot can easily drop most classes, but a misaligned one can easily put you in a bad spot. I often found myself psyching myself out and not going for shots out of fear of missing them and putting myself in a precarious position. When the fan works though, it really works, and lining up 2 good shots on an unaware or perfectly positioned target is satisfying as all hell. The double tap of huge hits tickles my brain wrinkles just right, and watching enemies ragdolls fly on kill will never cease to be as funny as it is intensely satisfying. This, combined with the increased movement it grants, make the fan an incredibly fun, if gimmicky, weapon to use in the right circumstances. I actually got onto Nucleus as my first map using it, and if you know anything about the Force of Nature, then you know that Nucleus is the perfect map for it. This allowed me to really hit the ground running with this weapon, and before I knew it, I was in flow and racking up kills like nobody's business. This level of fun didn't last long though, as after that match had ended, I had trouble finding another match that really suited the fan playstyle well. I kept landing on maps and game modes that it didn't really work with, and after not too long, I found myself having significantly less fun. The fan just isn't suited for every map and game state, and pretty heavily relies on being able to sneak up on enemies or take advantage of its movement utility. Eventually, I found myself on Powerhouse, which is a TF2 map that takes forever to clear and is infamous for stalemating. This is actually a blessing in disguise, as Powerhouse is a great map for some cheeky Force of Nature kills. Plus, its verticality makes using the fan's movement really fun and rewarding. After what felt like an eternity on Powerhouse, I ended up clearing a low health Brass Beast Heavy for my 50th kill on the Force of Nature. This was the second stage of the challenge complete, and I was happy to move forward. That said, I still enjoyed using the Force of Nature, even if it was a bit more situational than the stock scattergun. It ended up taking me approximately 1 hour and 4 minutes to get 50 kills with the fan, and all in all, I'll give it a 7 out of 10 on the fun scale. While still on the Powerhouse server, I immediately moved on to our next weapon, choosing to use the Shortstop next. This is by far the most unique scout primary in his whole lineup, being a medium-range pepper gun that uses pistol ammo and gives scout a weird push move. Full disclosure, I did not use the push at all in this challenge, as it wasn't really conducive to getting kills, and instead focused on pure offense with the Shortstop's primary fire. To say that the Shortstop took some adjustment would be an understatement. Compared to every other Scout primary, which encouraged getting right up close to the enemy and hammering away at them with meat shots, the Shortstop mandates a more careful distance, and its tight spread make it a clear medium to close range weapon. I found its damage to be pretty underwhelming at first, and struggled to figure out what the best range to use it from was. It was all in all probably the least fun I had had with a weapon up to this point in the challenge, that is, until I uncovered the combo. The Shortstop Criticola combo is what really helped this weapon click for me. Any misgivings about its range or damage immediately fizzled away as soon as I started peppering enemies with 50 to 60 damage meat shots from across the map. This made getting kills with the Shortstop at pretty much any range incredibly consistent and fun, and the midi crit to self penalty really didn't come into play too much thanks to primarily using it as a surprise tool. One thing that still took adjustment was aiming and landing shots, as the Shortstop really doesn't function like any of Scout's other weapons. It has a decently fast firing rate and reloads its entire clip at once, so it took a bit longer than normal to find the flow and figure out exactly when and where to be shooting enemies. I did struggle a bit with multiple enemies at once and contesting choke points, as the increased self-damage combined with the Shortstop's tighter spread make it a markedly one-target type of weapon. Most of Scout's weapons are like this, but the Shortstop's overall lower damage makes shifting between multiple enemies and challenging them all at once a bit less safe. I also wasn't a huge fan of being totally reliant on the Criticola. While it's definitely fun to use and very strong, anytime I didn't have it made me feel a bit like I was caught with my pants down. This isn't a loadout I'd recommend for someone looking to rack up crazy kill streaks, but rather one I'd recommend to someone who wants to be a cleaner mosquito for the enemy team. Aside from that, the Criticola made this leg of the challenge an absolute breeze, and some of the most fun I had in the entire process. It just made landing shots so satisfying, watching enemies scramble as their health unexpectedly melted to the pistol-wielding Scout across the map. I didn't love being reliant on the Criticola, but when it was up, it was very fun. Overall, I'd say the Shortstop on its own didn't feel too great to use, but when combined with the Criticola, it became a surprisingly potent tool that can cause any enemy to second-guess their approach to fighting the Scout. I can't say I'm too apt to use the Shortstop on its own again anytime soon, but I can definitely see myself comboing it with the soda again. This leg of the challenge took me about an hour and 10 minutes, and I'll rank it as a 6.5 out of 10 on the fun scale, primarily due to the disparity between the Criticola and the non-Criticola moments. Sadly, all fun eventually stops, and in this case, that happened as soon as I equipped my next weapon, the Backscatter. For those of you who don't know, this is often considered one of the worst primary weapons in the game, and one of two contenders for Scout's worst primary. Its main trait is the ability to always deal mini-crits when attacking enemies' backs at close range, but this is counterbalanced by a smaller clip size and significantly less accuracy. Each individual pellet tends to fly off in all sorts of random directions, which makes getting kills with it inconsistent at best. Take a look at how many landed shots it took to kill this single sniper. The first thing I realized about the Backscatter is that when using it for face-to-face combat, it is purely a worse version of the scattergun. It's just a scattergun with less ammo and less accurate pellets. Any kills you would have comfortably confirmed with the scattergun are immediately torn away by your wayward pellets making a cartoonish bullet outline around the enemy rather than killing them. It's a remarkably random and borderline frustrating weapon to use for just straight up fighting other players. As for its intended purpose, that is, sneaking up on enemies, this is also a bit more random than I would like. The range to land mini-crits is a bit poorly defined, and landing one from anywhere but right behind the enemy puts them at risk of flying in every wayward direction. You pretty much need to be pressed right up against the enemy's back to get the most out of each shot, and at that point, you're not crossing too many damage thresholds that you wouldn't be with the stock scattergun. But that's not to say that it's all bad, though. Compared to some other weapons that we'll be discussing and have discussed, it's still a very fundamental scattergun that's not too dissimilar from stock in terms of how you can use it. It's obviously less accurate and more flank-oriented, but if you're familiar with how to play Scout, you can likely acclimate to the Backscatter just fine. I am not. On top of that, I think that while the mechanic is a bit poorly conceived in general, there is a good degree of fun and satisfaction that comes with lining up a perfect mini-crit meat shot and shredding an enemy before they can react. The weapon doesn't quite turn Scout into a spy, as some people might say, but it's as close as we can get. After a bit, I really started getting into the groove with the Backscatter, knowing when to strike and jumping at opportunities to maximize damage. It's very fundamental, but there are maps and use cases that it really thrives in. I could definitely see a more flank-oriented player really vibing with this thing. It wasn't my least favorite scattergun I used for this challenge, but it was most certainly the most inconsistent. I wouldn't say I hated it or would never want to use it again, but I don't really feel compelled to immediately revisit it. Getting 50 kills with the Backscatter took me around an hour and 16 minutes, and I'll give it a 6 out of 10 on the fun scale. But do you want to know what my actual least favorite scout weapon for this challenge was? The ever appealing yet ever disappointing Babyface's Blaster. I've ranted about this thing a lot recently, as I also discussed it in my Weapons Valve Hates video, so I'm sure that I've used it more in the past 2 weeks than the entire TF2 community has since 2015. Regardless, this is a truly awful weapon. It's got such a conceptually cool set of mechanics, but is so torn down by its incredibly punishing set of downsides. Pretty much, as you do damage, you get faster, reaching the speed cap of the game after dealing 100 damage. However, you get turned slower back for every point of damage you take afterwards, requiring only 25 damage to reduce you to your minimum. You also lose your boost on double jumping or even taking fall damage. I understand that making the most mobile class in the game even faster could be very problematic, but this just makes the thing feel really overbalanced. For more information, go check out that video I made a bit ago to really expound upon it. The act of actually using the Babyface's Blaster in casual is like starving to death in the desert, having someone wave a sandwich in your face, and then throwing it away over and over again. You're constantly teased by getting a boost and getting to experience that high of moving incredibly quickly, and then losing it to splash damage from the soldier across the map. Actually aiming shots with this thing is an inconsistent mess, as accounting for the constant fluctuation of your movement speed and trying to adjust accordingly while fighting without double jumps can make it incredibly difficult to line up meat shots. It also has 2 less bullets than the default scattergun, despite having the same damage and bullet spread, so it's all around a bit frustrating to use compared to its competitors. This was genuinely the only leg of the challenge where I was not having a good time. I looked like Coraline's dad, just hunched over my computer, eyes glazed over, while I methodically became dead to every form of stimuli around me. I did get 2 kills at once in my first match though, and at one point got so frustrated that I started singing the final countdown off key, but those are the only moments of solace I had in this otherwise miserable leg of the process. I guess there is no one to blame. We're leaving ground, leaving. The Babyface's Blaster is just not fun to use. It can be a little thrilling on the rare occasion that you're actually able to get into a flow state with it, just running around and drive-bying enemies, but in the words of Demo Man, one errant twitch and that's all gone. And like everything else that's fun in this game, pyro shits all over it, as a single puff of fire can cause you to lose an entire boost once Afterburn is applied. I know Valve doesn't really balance this game anymore, but if we ever do get another balance update, please up the damage to lose the boost a little bit. My goal to make this video a misery sandwich might have been a bit poorly conceived, as the double whammy of the Backscatter to the Babyface's Blaster back-to-back was really taking its toll on me. I was unsure if I'd be able to beat my goal to complete the entire challenge in one day at this point, but I persevered. I was fully leaning into the Skunt archetype here. I wanted those 50 kills bad, man. I was killing friendlies, ruthlessly gunning down people during the humiliation, killing people during pregame, just trying everything I could to lighten up this process. I know it sounds a little silly, but I was just not having fun using the Babyface's Blaster for this long. There were a few BFB truthers in the comments in my previous video telling me how underrated this weapon was, and all I have to say to that is, I'm happy for you guys. After what felt like an eternity, I finally got my 50 kill on the BFB during the last moments of a peer match. Afterwards, I immediately peaced out and moved on to the final leg of the challenge. Getting 50 kills with the Babyface's Blaster took me an hour and 10 minutes, and it gets an easy 3 out of 10 on the fun scale. Luckily though, that fabled fun did return in the final leg of the challenge, as our last weapon was the Soda Popper, which, fun fact, used to be my main scout unlock. I've lost a lot of the muscle memory I had with it a few years ago, but out of every weapon in this video, I'd say I performed the best here. You could really chalk it up to me having been playing scout for about 6 hours straight at this point, but I was definitely doing my best with the Soda Popper. I wasn't pub stomping or even top scoring, but I was performing comfortably. The Soda Popper is such a strong, consistent, and reliable scattergun. And even if you don't fall back on the hype too much, which I admittedly didn't, you could absolutely still get results. I was even consistently killing heavies with it, which I know isn't a big deal as Scout kind of counters them, but I tend to struggle with optimizing my movement to avoid their tracking, so this was a marked bit of improvement. I was just straight up fucking with the soda popper at this point, just getting kill after kill, and it seemed like the challenge would wrap up pretty quickly. There were a few rough spots, like me and my medic struggling to kill this enemy medic for some reason, and my aim wasn't quite on point yet, but I was still doing better here than I had at any point in the challenge prior. I even got to play on 2 Fort for a bit, which I was avoiding up to this point in the challenge, as 2 Fort tends to be a bit of a YouTuber safe haven for challenges like these, and I wanted to vary it up, but I decided to throw caution to the wind and try it a bit at the end of this challenge. My 2 Fort match was really fun, and I even got to use the hype to really juke the enemy at one point in the match. I was also really surprised by how often I was hitting meat shots at this point, and I'm really not sure if that was improvement, dumb luck, or just familiarity with the soda popper and its feel. It was fun either way, and 2-tapping enemies never fails to be satisfying. Having a version of the fan that doesn't knock enemies back is great. Eventually, I landed at CTF Pelican Pit with just over 40 kills on my soda popper. A few kills later, I dropped a medic and realized that there was only one scout standing between me and my goal. I had a demo and a spy trying to kill him as well, and we all cornered and beat the hell out of him. If I could secure this kill, if I could be the one to get the kill credit, the challenge would be over. So, yeah, the soda popper was easily the most fun and breezy part of this challenge, and I think I made a smart choice to save it for the end so that I walked away with a positive impression. The total time for 50 soda popper kills was a mere 50 minutes, or an average of 1 kill per minute, which is saying a lot when respawn times and queue times are considered. Obviously, the soda popper gets a glowing 9 out of 10 on the fun scale, and only dodges a 10 because I didn't get to use the hype as much as I would have wanted. So, what did I gain from this challenge? Well, I'm not sure if I improved at Scout too much, but I certainly developed a better understanding of how to play him, where he wants to be, who he wants to fight, when he should go in and get out, etc. On top of that, I also learned what Scout weapons I liked the best, so let's rank them. Please note that this is not a ranking of the weapon's objective quality or viability, and that I'm purely ranking the experience I had using them for this challenge. This is not a viability ranking, more of a fun ranking, for me. At the bottom, we have the Babyface Blaster. Screw this weapon, I simply do not like it. Next, we have the Backscatter, which is definitely more consistent, but all around not too much more fun. Third from the bottom is the Shortstop, which is definitely fun, but a bit too reliant on help to do its job. Next up is the Force of Nature, which is very fun, but a bit too sloppy at confirming kills for my liking. Second place goes to the Scattergun, which is probably objectively the best and would have been my number 1 if not for the soda popper. I love this thing. It's easily my favorite weapon from this challenge, and my personal new favorite Scout primary. Once again, the Scattergun is probably objectively better, but I just like the Dr. Pepper gun. And with that, I want to thank you for watching. This is actually a super fun video to make, so if you enjoyed, let me know and I'll make more. I am 100% down to do this again for other classes, even if it does mean I'll have to buy a Strange Huntsman and Machina at some point, so just say the word and I'll make more. Thanks, I hope you have a fantastic day before, during, and after watching, and I'll catch you all later. Thanks and cheers.